The night is older than humanity, and for most of life on Earth it belongs to other creatures. In the deep past, when the sun sinks behind the low ridges of an ancient landscape and the last warmth drains out of the stones, the world changes owners. Eyes open in the brush, shapes move where daylight had shown only grass, thorn, and dust. Hyenas begin to test the dark, cats slip through the margins of waterholes, insects rise in humming clouds, the air cools quickly. And for a small band of early humans gathered beneath a rock overhang, darkness is not just the absence of light, it is a pressure. It presses against the skin, against the nerves, against every instinct that says the world is full of teeth. Then, somewhere in that darkness, there is a glow. It may be no larger than a cluster of embers protected under ash. It may be a branch taken from a wildfire and fed carefully through the night. It may be a flame rising from dry grass, cracking softly while faces appear and vanish around it. But in that unstable circle of light, something extraordinary is happening. The animals outside the glow still belong to the night, but the centre has changed. Here, heat gathers. Here, shadows retreat. Here, meat softens. Roots become edible. Hands reach toward warmth, and eyes no longer search only for danger. They search one another. A place that would otherwise be fear becomes a place of waiting, memory, and attention. The ancient world has not yet become human, but one of its most powerful forces has been invited close enough to touch. The story of fire is often told as if it were a simple discovery, almost like finding a useful stone or noticing a sharp edge. Yet fire is not an object. It is alive in the most unsettling way. A non-living thing can be alive. It feeds, spreads, breathes, dies, escapes, and destroys. To control it, early humans had to do something stranger than invent a tool. They had to form a relationship with the process. A hand axe can be dropped and picked up again. A spear can be carried from camp to camp. But flame demands constant care. It must be watched, nourished, divided, sheltered from rain, protected from wind, and kept from becoming catastrophe. In this sense, fire may have been one of the first things humans learned not merely to use, but to tend. Before we go deeper, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, if this is the kind of history and mystery you enjoy, because the mystery of fire is not just when humans first used it, it is how something so dangerous became so intimate that, eventually, no human world could be imagined without it. The ancient fire revolution did not happen in a single brilliant moment. There was no lone genius striking sparks beneath the prehistoric sky, while history changed all at once. What survives in the record suggests something far slower, more uneven, and more difficult to reconstruct. Fire appears first as a possibility, then as an occasional advantage, then as a repeated habit, and only much later as a dependable part of human life. Scholars still debate where the line should be drawn between encountering fire, using fire, controlling fire, and making fire at will. These are not minor distinctions. A troop of animals may benefit from a burned landscape after lightning has passed through. A clever primate may approach smoking ground to gather roasted seeds or stunned animals, but a species that can carry embers, preserve them through the night, and build social life around a hearth has crossed into another kind of existence. The evidence remains incomplete because fire is a poor historian. It consumes its own traces. Ash dissolves, charcoal scatters, wind and water move sediments. Later fires can confuse earlier ones. A burned bone in an ancient cave may mean a hearth, or it may mean a natural blaze swept through long after humans had gone. A reddened stone may have been heated deliberately, or changed by geological forces, in open landscapes, where many early humans lived, a million years of rain, dust, erosion. Trampling, and animal activity can erase the fragile remains of a flame that once meant survival. Archaeologists are left searching for patterns, clusters of burned material, repeated hearth-like features, heated stone tools, microscopic ash crystals, changes in sediment chemistry, and bones altered in ways that suggest controlled heat rather than random wildfire. And still the question burns through the evidence: when did fire begin to rewire us? Not just our camps, not just our diets, but our bodies, our minds, our nights, our migrations, our technologies, and eventually our civilizations. The domestication of fire may be older than farming by hundreds of thousands of years, older than pottery, older than writing, older than cities, older than every kingdom whose ruins now stand in deserts and forests. It reaches back toward human relatives who would not recognize a city, a temple, or a crown, but who may have understood the importance of keeping a coal alive beneath a layer of ash, long before metal glowed in furnaces, long before bread baked in ovens, long before lamps shone in palace halls. There was the small trembling hearth at the edge of darkness. Its consequences are difficult to overstate, though they are easy to overlook because fire became so ordinary. A cooked meal feels humble, a campfire feels simple, a flame in a stove, a candle, a kiln, a forge, a furnace, an engine, a power plant, these seem like different things, separated by invention and scale, yet they are branches from the same ancient transformation. Fire begins as heat and light, but it becomes a way of reorganizing matter. It breaks down food before the stomach does. It hardens wood, it cracks stone, it changes clay into ceramic, ore into metal, darkness into social time, cold land into habitable territory. It lets humans live not only inside an environment, but against it, around it, and eventually over it. That power carries a warning from the beginning. Fire protects, but it also kills. It gathers people, but it can empty forests. It cooks food, but fills lungs with smoke. It opens cold worlds, but starts a long chain of burning that, in the far future, will reach coal seams, oil fields, engines, factories, and the unstable atmosphere of the modern planet. No single explanation fully accounts for how one element became the hidden engine of civilization, because fire is not one invention. It is many revolutions stacked inside one another. Biological, social, technological, ecological, and symbolic revolutions all glow within the same ember. To follow that ember backward is to enter a world without certainty. The first hearths may not look like hearths. The first cooks may not know they are changing the destiny of the human body. The first night gatherings may leave no words behind, only the faintest mark of heat on stone and bone. Yet somewhere in that long uncertainty, human life begins to bend around flame. The old night remains outside the circle. Predators still wait. The wind still moves over the grass. But inside the glow, hands are free, food is changing, faces are visible, and time itself is widening. The fire does not merely warm the ancient humans who sit beside it. It begins, slowly and almost invisibly, to make them into something else. Before the flame becomes a companion, the world is harsher, narrower, and ruled by boundaries the human body cannot easily cross. It is a world where cold arrives without mercy, where darkness shortens movement, where raw food demands long chewing and hard digestion, and where the night is not a place to gather but a place to endure. To imagine early humans before reliable fire is not to imagine helpless creatures. They are already intelligent, social, observant, and inventive. They know landscapes intimately, they follow water, fruiting trees, animal tracks, seasonal movements, and the shifting moods of weather. But their lives are still pressed tightly against limits that later humans will push outward with heat and light. In this older world, survival depends on daylight. The sun is not only a source of warmth, it is a clock, a shield, and a boundary marker. When light fades, travel becomes dangerous, gathering becomes uncertain, butchering an animal becomes risky, because the scent of blood carries into the dark and draws competitors better equipped for nocturnal violence. A carcass may feed a group, but it may also summon hyenas, leopards, lions, or other predators whose senses sharpen when human vision weakens. Without fire, there is no bright perimeter, no smoke barrier, no crackling warning at the edge of camp. There is only vigilance, closeness, and the hope that shelter, numbers, and silence are enough. The body also pays a price. Raw plant foods can be tough, fibrous, bitter, toxic, or simply inefficient. Roots and tubers may contain energy, but much of it is locked away behind cellular walls that teeth and gut must work hard to break. Raw meat can be nourishing, but it resists chewing, spoils quickly, and carries parasites and pathogens. Early humans and their relatives are not delicate modern eaters lost without kitchens. They have adaptations and habits suited to wild food, still. What survives in the record suggests that cooking later opens an energetic door. Before that door, the body must spend more time processing food and may extract less from it. A day can be shaped by the slow labour of chewing as much as by the search for the meal itself. There is a lesser-known consequence in this without reliable fire. Some landscapes are not merely uncomfortable, but seasonally unreachable. Cold highlands, wet forests, wind-exposed plains, and long winter zones impose costs that naked skin and simple shelter cannot fully solve. Early humans can be resilient, and some may survive cool conditions through body size, mobility, fat, clothing-like coverings made from hides, or simply by avoiding the worst extremes. Yet fire changes the equation. Without it, the map of possible human life is smaller. Night temperatures matter, wet wood matters, a sudden storm matters. The difference between a survivable evening and a fatal one may be only a few degrees, a dry refuge, or the ability to keep warmth alive until dawn. The pre-fire world is also a world with fewer materials transformed by human intention. Stone can be struck, bone can be broken, wood can be shaped by scraping and impact, but heat unlocks changes that hands alone cannot manage. A wooden spear can be sharpened without fire, but fire hardening makes points more durable. Certain stones fracture more predictably after heating. Resins become workable. Clay remains mud until flame makes it something else. These developments belong more fully to later parts of the story, but their absence matters at the beginning. Before controlled fire, human technology lives mostly within the natural properties of found materials. After fire, those properties can be altered. Yet this older life is not empty of complexity. That is important, because the fire revolution should not be told as a simple tale of darkness suddenly becoming intelligence. Long before dependable hearths, early humans already inhabit a world of learning. They recognize animal behavior, remember roots, share food, care for vulnerable group members, and make tools with patterns that can spread across generations. Some groups likely understand natural fire very well. Lightning strikes. Volcanic activity, dry season grass fires, and smouldering logs are part of many ancient environments. Animals flee from fire, but they also exploit its aftermath. Birds have been observed near modern fires catching escaping prey. Grazers return to fresh green shoots after burned ground recovers. Predators patrol edges where confused animals break cover. Early humans, watchful and opportunistic, would almost certainly have noticed that fire changes a landscape into a temporary feast. A burned plain is full of signals, the smell of smoke marks danger, but also possibility. Charred ground may expose burrows, roasted seeds may be easier to gather, small animals may be trapped, stunned, or killed. New growth after a burn attracts herbivores. In this sense, the first step toward fire use may not have been courageously reaching into flame, but following fire at a distance, reading its aftermath, and learning that destruction can reveal food. Scholars still debate how much such behaviour should count as fire use. It may be more accurate to call it fire awareness, an ability to understand that flame reorganises the world, even before anyone can command it. There is something quietly profound in that stage. The ancient humans do not yet own the fire, they do not summon it, they wait for the sky to make it, or for dry grass to carry it, or for a distant blaze to leave behind smoking edges. Fire is still wild, still belonging to weather and chance, but the mind that follows it is already changing. It begins to connect heat with softened flesh, smoke with safety or danger, ash with aftermath, burned ground with opportunity. The world is no longer only a set of places and seasons, it is a set of processes that can be anticipated. The limits of this life are difficult to measure because the evidence remains incomplete. We cannot stand beside a group from 1 million or 2 million years ago and watch how they spend a cold night. We cannot count the hours they chew or know how often predators force them from a carcass. We infer from bones, tools, landscapes, teeth, climate, animal communities, and the scattered chemistry of ancient sediments. No single explanation fully accounts for the long transition from fireless living to hearth-centered life, but the contrast is clear enough to feel. Before reliable fire, humanity is clever, adaptable, and social, yet still deeply exposed. After fire, exposure begins to turn into negotiation. This is the world the flame enters, not a blank world, not a primitive stage waiting passively for progress, but a living, dangerous, intelligent world, already full of experiments. The coming revolution begins because early humans are not separate from nature. They are close enough to notice its smallest changes. They know where shade lasts, where water hides, where predators pass, where dry branches collect after storms, and when fire crosses the land. They learn to watch not only what it destroys, but what it makes possible. At first, the safest way to use fire may have been to let it remain someone else's disaster. A lightning strike splits a dry tree in the distance. Wind pushes flame through grass. The fire runs low and fast over the land, snapping in the stems, climbing briefly into shrubs, then sinking back into smoke and blackened earth. Animals scatter, some escape, some do not. When the heat fades and the worst of the danger passes, early humans can approach the edges, not as masters of flame, but as careful scavengers of its consequences. They find warmth in the ground, softened roots, roasted insects, dead reptiles, small mammals caught in burrows, perhaps even large carcasses partly cooked by accident. Fire is still wild, but it has begun to leave gifts. The step from taking what fire leaves behind to taking fire itself is enormous. A burning branch is not like a stone tool. It is unstable, painful, bright, and hungry. It can injure the carrier, ignite dry grass, or vanish into smoke before the group reaches shelter. To carry flame, and someone must understand fuel without having a word for fuel. Dry wood catches, green wood smokes, bark curls, grass flares and dies, dung can smoulder, rotten wood may hold an ember. Ash can protect heat like a blanket. These are not abstract lessons. They are learned through hands, burns, failures, and repetition. The evidence remains incomplete, but what survives in the record suggests that the earliest relationship with fire may have been less about creating sparks than about preserving accidents. Keeping an ember alive is a different skill from admiring a blaze. It requires patience. A group that captures a coal from a wildfire must slow down around it. Someone has to carry it, guard it from rain, feed it at intervals, and know when to bury it in ash so it sleeps rather than dies. That sleeping fire may be one of the most important inventions never carved into stone. An ember banked carefully beneath ash can survive into morning. It can turn a cold dawn into heat without waiting for lightning or friction or chance. It can make one camp into a source for the next. In some traditional societies known from recent history, fire carrying has been done with smouldering bark, fungi, dry dung, or plant fibres. These examples are not direct windows into deep prehistory, but they show the principle long before easy fire-making. Humans can live by fire-keeping. There is a strange discipline hidden in that word, keeping. It implies memory distributed across the group. Children must learn not to scatter the coals. Adults must know which wood to gather before dark. The camp must be arranged so that flame warms without devouring shelter. Movement must be planned around the living coal. A sudden storm becomes not only discomfort, but a threat to the group's stored heat. Fire begins to create responsibilities. It adds labour, but also reward. It's a tool that refuses neglect. Scholars still debate when this keeping became habitual. Some archaeological sites hint at very early use, with burned bones, heated sediments, or stone artefacts found in patterns that may suggest human association with fire hundreds of thousands of years ago, and in some claims even earlier. Other specialists urge caution, because natural fires can intrude into caves, roots can burn underground, and sediments can be altered long after humans leave. This uncertainty matters because the fire revolution is not one line in time. It is more like a long shoreline, where waves of evidence appear and disappear. Some groups may use fire occasionally while others do not. Some landscapes may make fire easy, others nearly impossible. A dry savanna offers flame differently than a damp forest. A volcanic region offers different chances than a rain-soaked valley. The skill of carrying fire may also have preceded the skill of making it. This surprises modern minds because we often imagine control beginning with ignition sparks struck from stone, a drill spun between palms, tinder catching in a curl of smoke. But ignition is technically demanding. It requires the right materials, the right dryness, the right motion, and a great deal of practiced knowledge. Preserving an existing ember may be easier and older. A group that cannot make fire at will can still become dependent on it, as long as it rarely lets the ember die. That dependence would be fragile. A long rain, a river crossing, or a careless night could return the group to darkness. In that fragility lies one of the great tensions of early fire use. The more useful flame becomes, the more disastrous its loss may feel. Capturing fire also changes the meaning of place. A shelter with stored embers is not just a sleeping spot. It is a centre. A place where fire has been maintained may attract repeated use, because the habits around it become familiar. Wood-gathering paths develop. Ash accumulates. Bones discarded nearby. Stones are placed, moved, heated, cracked. The ground itself begins to remember human presence. Later archaeologists will search for these memories in layers of sediment. But for the people living there, the hearth is not evidence. It is the warm centre of a risky arrangement with a dangerous ally. There is also a social problem who approaches the flame first, who controls it, who feeds it, who is allowed near it. The record cannot answer in detail. No single explanation fully accounts for how fire altered early authority or cooperation. Yet it is reasonable to infer that fire encouraged new forms of shared attention. A flame is visible to everyone. Its needs are obvious. Its failure affects all. Around it, cooperation becomes practical rather than sentimental. One person gathers wood. Another watches children. Another processes food. Another scans the dark beyond the glow. Fire does not create social life from nothing, but it may intensify the habit of doing difficult things together. And always there is danger. A campfire too close to dry bedding becomes a disaster. Smoke trapped beneath rock can choke. Sparks can destroy stored materials. Children can be burned. The same flame that keeps predators away can announce the group's location across the night. Fire is a protector that must itself be contained. That double nature may explain why fire becomes powerful in later myth and ritual across human societies. Even if those later stories cannot be projected backward too confidently, they preserve a truth the first firekeepers would have known: in their skin flame is never merely useful. It is always a negotiation. So the revolution begins not with triumph, but with caution. A hand reaches toward a smouldering branch. A coal is lifted, wrapped, sheltered, carried. It almost dies. It flares too high. It smokes bitterly. It burns fingers. It survives the night. At dawn, when the world is grey and cold and the predators have withdrawn into the distance, someone stirs ash and finds red heat still breathing underneath. The group does not have to wait for lightning. For one more day, the sun is not the only source of warmth on Earth. Once fire enters food, the revolution moves inward. It no longer glows only in the centre of camp or presses back the darkness at the edge of the night. It begins to work inside the body, changing what can be eaten, how much energy can be gained, how long a meal takes to process, and perhaps even what kind of human being the ancient world can sustain. The first cooked meals may not have looked impressive. A strip of meat darkened at the edge of a flame, a tuber pushed into hot ash. Seeds warmed on a flat stone, marrow softened inside a cracked bone. Yet these small acts may have altered human evolution more deeply than many grander inventions that came later. Cooking is often treated as comfort, but in deep time it is chemistry with consequences. Heat breaks down tough plant fibres. It gelatinizes starches, making them easier to digest. It denatures proteins, changing their structure before teeth and stomach begin their work. It kills many parasites and pathogens, though not always perfectly. It reduces the force needed to chew, and the time needed to process food, and the energetic cost of digestion. Raw food can sustain life. And early humans were not helpless without cooked meals, but cooked food offers a different bargain. It gives the body more usable energy from the same landscape. That matters because the human body is expensive. Brains are costly organs. They burn energy constantly, even when the body is still. The rise of larger brains in the human lineage cannot be explained by cooking alone, and scholars still debate exactly how much fire contributed to that process. Climate change, meat eating, social complexity, tool use, cooperation, and ecological flexibility all matter. But cooked food may have helped support the energetic demands of a changing body. A species that gains more calories with less chewing and digestion has more energy available for growth, reproduction, movement, and thought. No single explanation fully accounts for the expansion of the human brain, yet fire belongs in the circle of causes because it changes the economy of energy itself. There is a surprising clue in the face. Compared with other apes, humans have smaller teeth, weaker jaws, and shorter guts relative to body size. These traits do not appear all at once, and they cannot be reduced to one cause, but they fit a broader pattern of food becoming easier to process, Stone tools had already helped by cutting meat, cracking bones, and pounding plants. Fire adds another form of external digestion. It moves some of the work outside the body and into the hearth. In a sense, the campfire becomes part of the digestive system, an organ made of flame, ash, and shared knowledge. This idea is powerful, but it must be handled carefully. Some researchers argue that habitual cooking may have begun early enough to shape Homo erectus, whose body appears more human-like than earlier hominins' longer legs, narrower pelvis, smaller teeth, and possibly a different pattern of growth and movement. Others point out that secure archaeological evidence for regular fire use is younger than some of these anatomical changes. The evidence remains incomplete, and the timing is still debated. It is possible that meat eating and tool processing did much of the early work, with cooking becoming reliable later. It is also possible that early fire use left traces too fragile for us to find. Between bone anatomy and burned sediment lies a gap where inference must walk carefully. Still, the logic of cooking is difficult to ignore. Imagine a group returning to a shelter with roots that would be tough or mildly toxic when raw. Heat can soften them, reduce toxins, and make starch more accessible. Bitter plants become tolerable. Tough meat becomes chewable for the very young, the old, or the injured. A carcass that would spoil quickly can be roasted or smoked enough to last a little longer, though true preservation develops unevenly and depends on technique. Food sharing becomes easier when large pieces can be cooked, divided, and consumed around a central place. A meal becomes not just intake, but an event. The social consequences are as important as the biological ones. Cooking creates waiting. Raw food can be eaten as it is gathered or butchered, but cooked food requires delay. Someone must tend the fire. Someone must prepare the food. The group must remain near the hearth long enough for heat to do its work. This delay may encourage new expectation sharing, guarding, turn-taking, perhaps even conflict over portions. Cooked food is valuable because it has been improved. A roasted tuber is not simply found food, it is food invested with time and care. That makes it both more cooperative and more stealable. Around cooked meals, the daily rhythm changes. The evening can become a time of return. Instead of each individual feeding only along the path of the day, food can be brought back to a central fire. Meat from a hunt, scavenged remains, gathered plants, shellfish, seeds, or underground storage organs can be processed in one place. The hearth becomes a kind of primitive schedule. It says, come back here, wait here, eat here, sleep near here. What survives in the record suggests that later human sites often organised themselves around hearths, but the roots of that pattern may be much older than the clearest evidence allows us to prove. Cooking also changes who can survive. The very young cannot chew like adults, the old may lose teeth, the sick and injured may struggle with raw toughness. Softer cooked food can widen the circle of dependence and care. This does not mean fire invented compassion, because evidence for care appears in other forms as well, and social mammals often support one another in ways that do not require hearths. But fire may have made care more practical. A weakened individual who can consume softened food may recover. A child can be weaned onto cooked starches or tender meat. A grandparent with worn teeth may still contribute knowledge, tool skill, or child care. In this quiet way, flame may help preserve memory inside the group by helping more memory bearers stay alive. There are costs. Smoke irritates lungs and eyes. Burned food can carry harmful compounds. Cooking requires fuel, and fuel gathering takes time. A group dependent on cooked meals must solve the problem of wood, dung, grass, peat, or other burnable materials. In wet landscapes, that problem becomes serious. Fire also increases visibility. The smell of roasting meat may attract predators or rivals. The benefits are immense, but they are never free. The ancient hearth is not a miracle machine. It is a risky technology that must pay for itself every day. And yet, once food has passed through flame, the older world becomes harder to return to. A cooked meal asks less from the jaws and gives more to the blood. It gathers bodies into a circle and time into a pattern. It softens the hard edges of survival just enough that new possibilities appear. The night is still dangerous. The cold still waits beyond the glow, but inside the body, a change is unfolding that no ash layer can fully preserve. Fire is turning landscape into calories more efficiently than before, and calories into movement, childhood, thought, and endurance. The revolution is no longer outside the human animal. It is being swallowed. When fire makes the night usable, it changes more than the number of hours in a day. It changes the quality of those hours. Before reliable flame, darkness narrows life into caution. Bodies draw close for warmth and safety. Movement slows, and attention is pulled outward toward every sound beyond the shelter. But around a hearth, the night becomes a different kind of territory. It is still dangerous beyond the glow, still filled with animals whose eyes and ears are better adapted to darkness. Yet the circle of light creates a human island inside it. Within that island, faces can be seen, hands can keep working, food can be shared after sunset. The group can remain awake not only because fear demands it, but because there is something to do. This may be one of fire's least visible revolutions, because it leaves almost no direct trace. Archaeologists can find charcoal, heated stone, burned bone, and ash, but they cannot easily find an evening. They cannot excavate the first long pause after a meal. When the fire is low and the day's urgency softens, they cannot measure the first time a group stays awake longer than necessary, because warmth and light make wakefulness tolerable. Yet the consequences may be enormous. A species that can extend social time after dark gains space for grooming, tool repair, teaching, planning, observation, and the slow exchange of memory. The evidence remains incomplete, but the logic is compelling. Fire does not only illuminate the landscape, it illuminates one another. Faces matter. In daylight, early humans can read posture, gesture, expression, and intention. At night without fire, much of that subtle world disappears. A flame brings it back. It makes eyes visible, hands visible, wounds visible, food visible. It allows a child to watch how an elder scrapes a hide, retouches a stone edge, twists fibre, or breaks a bone for marrow. It lets adults notice who is anxious, who is tired, who is hungry, who is hiding injury, who is reaching for more than their share. Social life becomes clearer in the dark. Around fire, the group can remain a group after sunset instead of becoming a cluster of half-seen bodies waiting for morning. This has implications for language, though no one can prove a simple line from hearth to speech. Scholars still debate when language in a fully modern sense emerged, and the evidence is indirect. Bones can reveal vocal anatomy only imperfectly. Stone tools can suggest teaching and planning, but not grammar. Genes can hint at capacities, but not conversations. Still, many researchers have wondered whether firelit evenings created a setting where more complex communication could flourish. When work slows and bodies gather, there is time for recounting routes, remembering danger, coordinating tomorrow's movements, and reinforcing bonds. A story does not need writing to become powerful. It needs listeners, repetition, and a reason to be remembered. The first fireside stories, if they existed in any recognizable form, are lost beyond recovery. No word survived from those deep nights, but it is not difficult to imagine what subjects mattered, where the herd went, which valley held water, which plant made a child sick, where a cat was seen at dusk, which relative died in a flood season, which distant ridge smoked after lightning. Memory, in such a world, is survival. Around the hearth, memory can become shared property, it can be corrected, expanded, dramatized, and passed to the young. What survives in the record suggests that later human societies use firelit gatherings for teaching, ritual, and narrative, but caution is needed when looking backward. We cannot assume that ancient hearths held myths in the later sense. We can say only that fire creates the conditions in which communal memory can deepen. There is also a quieter emotional transformation. Fire changes fear, it does not abolish it. The snap of a branch beyond the light still matters, the smell of a predator still cuts through smoke. But fear becomes organised around a centre rather than spread evenly through the dark. The hearth gives the group a place from which to watch. It turns unknown space into zones inside the light, edge of the light, beyond the light. That mapping may seem simple, but it is psychologically profound. A bright centre creates a human order in a non-human night. The world outside remains vast, but it is no longer everywhere at once. Predators may have respected that boundary, at least sometimes. Many animals avoid flame, smoke, and unpredictable light, though hunger and habit can overcome caution. Fire is not an invisible wall. A determined predator, especially one accustomed to humans, can still be dangerous, but even partial deterrence matters. A group that sleeps with a maintained hearth may gain more rest, and rest has consequences. Better sleep supports recovery, attention, learning, and social tolerance. No single explanation fully accounts for human cognitive evolution, but the ability to sleep more safely on the ground, away from trees and exposed branches, may have contributed to changes in rest and social life. Some have even argued that fire helped humans become more fully terrestrial sleepers. The night work made possible by fire also changes technology. Stone tools can be repaired by glow light, wooden shafts can be scraped, hides can be cleaned, fibres can be twisted into cord. Children can practice small tasks when daylight gathering is done. Not all of this begins immediately, and much of it leaves poor evidence because wood, fibre, and hide vanish far more easily than stone. Yet the expanded evening gives human hands more time. It is one thing to survive the day. It is another to carry the day's materials into the night and keep transforming them. Fire stretches labour beyond sunlight, and with that stretch comes continuity. A lesser-known detail lies in the nature of attention around flame. Fire draws the eyes without demanding a fixed task. Anyone who has sat by a campfire understands this in a modern way, though the ancient experience would have carried sharper stakes. The moving light, the warmth, the steady crackle, the shifting embers create a state between watchfulness and rest. It is not sleep, but it is not the intense focus of hunting or tool-making either. Such states may matter for imagination. They allow memory to loosen, associations to form, and social presence to feel secure. This is difficult to prove scientifically in deep prehistory, but it helps explain why fire becomes not only practical, but magnetic. Inside that magnetism, group identity may strengthen. The hearth distinguishes us from everything outside it. Those who share the warmth, the food, the smoke, and the night watch belong to one another in a way that daylight foraging alone may not fully create. The same flame that cooks a meal also marks a social boundary. It says who is near enough to be trusted, who is outside, who may approach, who must be watched. Later human cultures will surround fire with rules, taboos, ceremonies, and meanings. But the roots may lie in something simpler. Fire gathers bodies into a visible circle and makes belonging easier to perceive. By the time the embers sink low and ash begins to pale over them, the night has been altered. It has not become safe in any absolute sense. The ancient world never gives safety cheaply, but the hours after sunset are no longer empty, stolen, or merely endured. They are inhabited, and in those inhabited hours, the human group becomes more than a feeding and moving unit. It becomes an audience, a workshop, a memory store, a watchpost, and perhaps the first true home. The flame has taken darkness, the oldest territory of fear, and carved out a place where human minds can remain awake together. Smoke is the part of fire that does not stay politely in the hearth. It moves where flame cannot. It crawls into cracks, drifts through leaves, hangs beneath stone ceilings, clings to hair and skin, and marks a camp long after the last visible ember has faded. To modern eyes, smoke is often nuisance, pollution, or warning. To ancient humans, it is likely all of these things and something more. It is a shield made of discomfort. It stings the eyes, roughens the throat, and blackens the roof of a shelter. Yet it also keeps insects away, dries meat, hardens surfaces, and tells the surrounding world that something hot and dangerous lives here. In landscapes thick with biting insects, that alone can matter enormously. Mosquitoes, flies, ticks, and other parasites are not small inconveniences in deep time. They drain blood, spread disease, irritate wounds, disturb sleep, and torment infants who cannot defend themselves. A smoky fire near the entrance of a shelter or upwind of a resting place can reduce the swarm. It does not create perfect protection, and the evidence for ancient insect control is indirect. But the principle is simple enough that many human communities across history have used smoke for exactly this purpose. Around a prehistoric hearth, smoke may have been part of the price of rest burning eyes in exchange for fewer bites, coughing in exchange for sleep. The same haze changes the relationship between humans and other animals. Flame is the obvious deterrent, but smoke carries the warning farther. Predators do not need to understand fire as humans do to recognize heat, smell, and instability as things to avoid. A smoky camp may confuse scent trails, mask the smell of stored food, or signal danger to animals moving nearby. It cannot be trusted completely. Hunger, boldness, and habit can overcome fear, and no ancient group would have survived by assuming smoke made them untouchable. Still, even a small reduction in nighttime attacks matters. If fire makes a shelter safer one night in 10, or allows deeper sleep for a few extra hours, it changes the arithmetic of survival. Shelter itself changes around fire. Without flame, a cave or overhang is valuable because it blocks wind, rain, sun, and predators from some directions. With flame, that same place becomes more complicated. A deep cave may trap smoke and become unbreathable. A shallow overhang may vent better but offer less protection. A camp must be arranged with air in mind, even if no one can describe airflow in modern terms. People learn where smoke pools, where sparks rise, where dry bedding cannot be placed, where children should not sleep, where wood can be stacked, and when the wind makes a location dangerous. Fire does not simply make shelter better, it forces humans to redesign shelter behaviour. What survives in the record sometimes preserves this intimacy between flame and place. In later prehistoric sites, blackened ceilings, ash lenses, reddened sediments, and repeated hearth placements show that humans return to certain protected spaces again and again. In earlier periods, the evidence is harder to read, and scholars still debate many claimed fire traces, but the pattern becomes unmistakable over time. A hearth is often not random. It sits where heat, light, smoke, and movement can be managed. Ancient people may not leave architectural drawings, yet their choices are written in stains, charcoal, and the arrangement of debris. Fire also helps humans survive weather in ways that go beyond simple warmth. Wet clothing in later societies, damp hides, soaked bedding, and waterlogged tools can be dried. In earlier times, animal skins, plant fibres, wooden implements, and gathered fuel all benefit from controlled heat if kept far enough from flame. The ability to dry materials is easy to underestimate. Dampness kills slowly. It steals heat from the body, encourages rot, weakens cordage, spoils stored foods, and makes sleep miserable. A fire can turn a hostile wet evening into something survivable, though only if fuel remains dry enough to burn. That practical tension follows humans into cold forests, river valleys, coastlines, and glacial margins. There is a lesser-known survival advantage in smoke's ability to preserve. Drying and smoking meat or fish are not simple automatic outcomes of any campfire. They require knowledge, timing, airflow, and patience. But even partial drying near smoke can slow decay. In warm environments, meat spoils fast, and large carcasses create a race between humans, microbes, insects, and scavengers. Fire changes the race. It can roast food quickly, but smoke can extend usefulness beyond the immediate meal. The evidence for deep prehistoric preservation is difficult because smoked meat leaves little clear archaeological signature, yet the possibility matters. A group able to stretch food across days gains flexibility. It can remain in one place longer, feed vulnerable members more reliably, and plan with a slightly longer horizon. The health story is more complicated. Fire protects against some hazards while creating others. Cooked food may reduce parasites, smoke may repel insects, warmth may prevent cold stress, but smoke inhalation damages lungs. Soot can irritate eyes. Poorly ventilated shelters can become dangerous. Ancient hearths may have improved survival overall while imposing chronic costs that bones do not always reveal clearly. No single explanation fully accounts for the balance. What can be said is that humans did not enter a clean contract with flame. They accepted a smoky bargain, and the bargain followed them for hundreds of thousands of years, into huts, caves, longhouses, kitchens, workshops, and cities. Fire changes disease environments as well, though not always in straightforward ways. Heat can sterilize water if brought to boiling, but regular boiling depends on containers capable of holding water over fire, and those come much later in many regions, and hot stones dropped into containers may offer one path, but again the timing varies. Still, fire can cleanse tools, burn waste, reduce some parasites in food, and make certain habitats less insect-heavy. At the same time, settled hearth-centered life can concentrate refuse and attract rodents or scavengers. The ancient flame is never only a cure, it rearranges risk. In the cold, the rearrangement becomes dramatic. A body can survive low temperatures for a time through movement, shelter, fat, and group huddling. But fire allows stillness without immediate surrender to the cold. That matters at night, during storms, after injury, and in landscapes where warmth cannot simply be chased by migration. A hearth can create a pocket of climate. Not a large one, not a permanent one, but enough. A few meters around flame become a zone where fingers regain feeling. Meat can be processed, children can sleep, and elders can remain alive through hours that would otherwise drain them. Later humans will carry this pocket into Ice Age Europe, highlands, northern forests, and windswept open plains. Its beginnings may be much older. The strange thing is that fire makes humans both more dependent and more independent. More independent from weather, darkness, insects, predators, and raw food. More dependent on fuel, skill, cooperation, and maintenance. A group with fire can endure places that would otherwise reject it, but only by serving the needs of the hearth. Wood must be gathered before exhaustion. Embers must be protected before rain. Smoke must be managed before shelter becomes poison. Children must learn respect before curiosity becomes injury. Fire widens the world, but it also imposes discipline. By now the flame is no longer merely an event, it is infrastructure. It is protection, food processing, warmth, insect defense, material drying, and social center, all concentrated in a fragile glow that can still vanish in wind. The ancient shelter becomes something different because fire lives within it. The cave mouth, the branch windbreak, the hollow near water, the camp beneath trees, each is judged not only by what it offers the body, but by what it offers the fire. And so smoke rises above the deep past, thin and temporary, yet full of meaning. It marks a place where humans have negotiated with danger and won a little time. It marks where night has been softened, food transformed, insects driven back, and cold held at the edge of reach. It marks, perhaps more than flame itself, the beginning of a human atmosphere imperfect, choking, protective, and unmistakably made. For all the importance fire eventually gains in human history, proving its earliest use is one of archaeology's most frustrating problems. Stone tools survive for millions of years. Bones can harden into fossils. Teeth preserve microscopic wear. But fire is elusive. It flickers, consumes, scatters, and disappears. A hearth that once held together a group through freezing darkness may leave behind only a faint stain in the sediment, a few altered minerals, or fragments of charcoal so small they are almost indistinguishable from the natural background of a burned landscape. The farther back in time researchers look, the more uncertain the evidence becomes. This uncertainty has created one of the great debates in human origins. When exactly did early humans begin to control fire rather than merely encounter it? The answer depends partly on definitions. Natural wildfires have existed for hundreds of millions of years, long before humans. Lightning, volcanic eruptions, dry vegetation, and even spontaneous combustion in certain conditions can ignite landscapes. Early hominins undoubtedly saw fire. They likely exploited burned terrain. But controlled fire implies something more deliberate repeated use, maintenance, transport, or predictable placement. And proving deliberate control is extraordinarily difficult. A blackened patch in ancient sediment is not enough. Natural fires can sweep into caves or across open sites. Roots can burn underground and leave misleading traces. Chemical changes in soil can come from geological heating rather than human activity. Even burned bone presents problems. Bones exposed to wildfire behave differently depending on temperature, oxygen, moisture, and burial conditions. Archaeologists therefore look not for one clue, but for patterns. A cluster of burned bones near stone tools, repeated ash layers in the same location, heated stones arranged in ways unlikely to occur naturally, microscopic fragments of charcoal concentrated inside a shelter, sediments reddened by sustained low-temperature heating rather than sudden wildfire exposure. Even with these methods, the ancient record remains controversial. Some sites suggest possible fire use more than 1 million years ago, while others are disputed fiercely. At Kubifora in Kenya, certain patches of reddened sediment have been interpreted by some researchers as evidence of controlled fire associated with Homo erectus nearly 1.5 million years ago. Others argue the heating could have occurred naturally. At Chesawanja, also in Kenya, burned clay fragments have raised similar debates. In South Africa's Wonderwerk cave, microscopic ash particles and burned bone deep within the cave have been cited as strong evidence that humans controlled fire around 1 million years ago, because natural wildfires are less likely to penetrate so far into enclosed spaces. Yet even there, scholars debate details of interpretation and timing. The arguments can become intensely technical. Researchers analyse magnetic properties of sediment, crystalline changes in minerals, thermal alteration in stone tools, and microscopic plant remains transformed by heat. Tiny clues carry enormous weight because there are no eyewitnesses, no written records, and no certainty. A single misread layer can shift timelines by hundreds of thousands of years. The public often imagines archaeology as the discovery of dramatic objects, but the story of fire is built as much from chemistry and probability as from excavation itself. There is another complication: early fire use may not have been continuous. Modern people often assume that once humans discovered fire, they never looked back. But what survives in the record suggests something messier. Different groups may have had different relationships with flame. Some populations may have preserved fire for long periods. Others may have lost it during migrations, climate shifts, or ecological crises. Wet environments make reliable fire difficult. Fuel scarcity matters. Knowledge can disappear when populations shrink or fragment. No single explanation fully accounts for the uneven appearance of fire evidence across regions and periods. This possibility changes how the revolution should be imagined. Instead of a single breakthrough spreading instantly across humanity, fire mastery may have emerged gradually through experiments, failures, rediscoveries, and local traditions. One valley may hold groups accustomed to maintaining embers. Another nearby region may still depend largely on natural fires. Knowledge may pass through observation, imitation, or migration, but not perfectly. The fire revolution is therefore less like the flip of a switch, and more like dawn spreading unevenly across rough terrain. The archaeological challenge is made harder by preservation bias. Caves preserve evidence better than open-air camps. Dry regions often preserve more than wet forests. Sites repeatedly occupied may accumulate clearer hearth traces. While temporary camps vanish almost completely, this means the record may distort reality. Ancient humans probably used many environments that left little evidence behind. The places easiest for archaeologists to study are not necessarily the places most representative of early life. A lesser-known problem lies in temperature itself. Controlled hearths often burn at lower, steadier temperatures than wildfires. A fast-moving grass fire can produce intense but brief heat, while a maintained hearth may create more localized and sustained heating. Archaeologists use these differences to distinguish natural and human fires, but the distinction is not always clean. Ancient humans may also have used fire differently from later societies. A small ember-maintaining pit leaves different traces than a roaring blaze. Fires built repeatedly in the same place alter sediment over time, but occasional use may barely register archaeologically. There is something fitting about this uncertainty. Fire transformed human life partly because it sat between nature and intention. It was never entirely wild again once humans learned to manage it, but it was never fully domesticated either. Even today, when fires escape containment, forests burn, cities ignite, power grids fail, the oldest relationship between humans and flame still carries instability at its core. Archaeology inherits that instability. Researchers are not uncovering a neat technological invention preserved intact through time. They are chasing flickers through deep history. Yet despite all the debates, a broad picture does emerge. By several 100,000 years ago, controlled fire appears regularly enough in multiple regions that few scholars doubt its importance. Hearths become more common, burned food residues increase. Repeated occupation around fire features becomes clearer, the evidence stops looking accidental. Human life is reorganizing itself around heat. What remains uncertain is how long the transformation took to reach that point. Perhaps hundreds of thousands of years passed between occasional fire use and dependable mastery. Perhaps entire generations lived with only fragile access to flame, balancing constantly between dependence and loss. A single storm extinguishing precious embers could erase weeks of careful maintenance. In that world, fire knowledge would not feel inevitable. It would feel vulnerable. That vulnerability may explain why later human cultures treated fire with such seriousness. Across many ancient societies, tending the hearth became sacred duty, political symbol, communal ritual, or household responsibility. These traditions belong to much later periods and cannot simply be projected backward onto early humans, but they echo something older. The first firekeepers understood in practical terms what later civilizations expressed symbolically: a living flame is never guaranteed. Somewhere inside a cave, deep in the darkness beyond daylight, a patch of ash settles slowly onto stone. Somewhere on an open plain, a small controlled fire burns out and leaves almost nothing behind. Wind scatters charcoal. Rain dissolves traces. Thousands of centuries pass. Then, millions of years later, human beings kneel over those faint remains, searching for evidence that another human once sat there and kept the night alive. Among all the ancient humans who may have carried the first dependable flames, Homo erectus stands in the glow more often than any other, not because the case is settled beyond doubt, and not because every early hearth can be placed confidently in erectus hands, but because this species appears at the right turning point in the human story. Homo erectus has the body of a traveller, the endurance of a wanderer, and the archaeological shadow of a creature that pushes far beyond earlier boundaries. If fire begins to loosen humanity from the strict limits of climate, food, and darkness. Homo erectus is the first great candidate for showing what that loosening could make possible. Homo erectus emerges in Africa nearly 2 million years ago, though exactly where and how its earliest forms should be classified remains debated. It is more human-like in body than the smaller, older Australopiths and early Homo forms before it. It has longer legs, a more efficient walking and running build, and a larger brain than its predecessors, though still smaller than modern humans. Its face is heavy by modern standards, with strong brow ridges and a long, low skull. It is not us. But it is no longer something easily placed outside the human path. When its footprints and tools appear across ancient landscapes, they suggest movement, persistence, and an expanding ecological reach. The surprising thing about Homo erectus is distance. This is the first human species known to spread widely beyond Africa, reaching parts of Eurasia in a long, uneven process. Fossils and tools connected to erectus-like populations or closely related forms appear in places such as Georgia, Java, and China. The details of classification are complicated, and scholars still debate where Homo erectus ends and related regional populations begin. Yet the broader pattern remains striking. By deep prehistoric standards, these humans travel far. They cross into unfamiliar climates and animal worlds. They do not simply survive in one ancestral zone, they become a species of edges. Fire may help explain that expansion, though it should not be treated as a magic key that unlocks every migration. Homo erectus probably moves because of many interacting forces changing climates, shifting grasslands, animal migrations, tool use, diet flexibility, and social cooperation. But fire would make such movement more durable. A group able to cook unfamiliar foods, warm itself through cold nights, deter predators, and occupy shelters more effectively has an advantage when entering new lands. The evidence remains incomplete, especially for the earliest periods, but the association between Homo erectus, expanding range, and possible fire use is too important to ignore. One famous clue comes from the Herculean tool tradition, often associated with Homo erectus and later human species. The hand axes of this tradition, shaped on both sides into teardrop or oval forms, appear across broad regions and long stretches of time. They are not fire tools in themselves, yet they reveal capacities that matter for fire mastery planning, symmetry, learned technique, and repeated cultural habits. A creature that can shape stone through a sequence of controlled blows can also learn complex sequences involving embers, fuel, ash, wind, and heat. Toolmaking and firekeeping are different skills, but both require attention to transformation. At sites in East Africa and elsewhere, possible early fire traces appear in contexts where Homo erectus or related humans may have lived. Some are disputed, as earlier evidence always is. The challenge is not merely identifying heat, but identifying human control of heat. Still, if fire use extends back toward 1 million years or earlier, Homo erectus becomes the most likely firekeeper in many regions. Wonderwood Cave in South Africa is especially important because its deep interior deposits suggest controlled burning around 1 million years ago. No one can watch the fire being tended, and no single site can settle the entire global story. But such evidence narrows the distance between speculation and plausible history. If Homo erectus did control fire, the consequences would have reached into daily life in ways that are hard to see from bones alone. Its camps may have become more persistent, its diet may have broadened, its nights may have lengthened socially, its young may have learned around warmth and light, the species may have become better at turning risky landscapes into livable ones. Fire would not make Homo erectus modern, and it would not erase the differences between them and later humans. But it could help explain why this species endured for so long. Homo erectus, in various forms, survives for an astonishing span of time, perhaps more than 1.5 million years. Modern Homo sapiens have not yet come close to matching that duration. There is a dry understatement in that comparison by the standard of longevity. Homo erectus was doing something right. A lesser-known part of the story is that fire may also have created new social pressures for a species like Homo erectus. A body adapted for travel must still solve the problem of staying together. Fire encourages return to a centre, it rewards cooperation and punishes neglect. If cooked food becomes important, then food preparation becomes a shared event. If embers must be guarded, then responsibility becomes distributed. If warmth and protection concentrate in one place, then access to that place matters. These pressures could shape group behaviour without leaving clear fossils. They are the invisible architecture of fire-centred life. But there is a caution. It is tempting to imagine Homo erectus sitting around campfires in a way that feels almost familiar, with gestures, stories, and family scenes that resemble later human life. Some of that may be true in broad emotional outline, but the details remain unknown. We do not know how complex their communication was. We do not know how symbolic their thinking became. We do not know whether their fires were constant companions or valuable tools used intermittently. What survives in the record suggests possibility, not certainty. The glow is real, but the faces around it are blurred. Even blurred, they matter. Homo erectus stands at the threshold where fire may stop being only an environmental event and begin becoming a species habit. The anatomy suggests new energy demands. The migration suggests broader ambition or necessity. The tools suggest learned tradition. The possible hearths suggest heat drawn into human space. None of these clues alone proves the full fire revolution. Together, they create a figure in the smoke. A long-legged human relative moving across open country, carrying stone tools, following animals and water, perhaps protecting a coal through the night. The image is powerful because it is not quite ours. Homo erectus does not build cities, plant fields, write laws, smelt ore, or raise temples. Yet if it tends fire, it begins the line of practice that makes all those later things imaginable. The first flame kept alive by such hands would not announce civilization. It would only warm a camp, soften food, and push back the dark. But history often begins this way, not with monuments, but with repeated acts so practical that no one thinks to remember them. In the deep past, a group of Homo erectus moves through a landscape of grass, stone, and scattered trees. The sky lowers into evening. Somewhere behind them lies the ash of an old camp. Ahead lies uncertain ground. One member carries a smouldering fragment protected in bark, dung, or rotten wood, or perhaps the group knows where a sheltered ember waits beneath ash. The exact method is lost. The intention remains visible only as a possibility, but when the ember is coaxed back into flame. The ancient world changes again. Not everywhere, not permanently, not for every human group at once. Just here, in this small circle, where an older kind of human has learned that survival can be carried as heat. As the world tilts deeper into the long instability of the Ice Age, fire becomes more than comfort. It becomes a passport in a difficult country. The climates of the Pleistocene are not one endless winter, but a restless sequence of colder and warmer phases, advancing ice, retreating forests, expanding grasslands, shifting deserts, swollen rivers, lowered seas, and coastlines that move like borders in a dream. Human groups and their relatives live inside this changing map, following animals, plants, stone sources, water, and possibility. In such a world, fire is not merely something carried through space, it is something carried through uncertainty. Cold is only one part of the challenge. Open steppe and tundra can be windy, dry, and exposed. Forest margins can be damp and difficult to burn in. Highlands punish the body with thin air and sudden weather. Glacial landscapes reshape rivers, block routes, and create seasonal traps. In some places, nights fall below temperatures that a lightly sheltered body cannot endure for long. A species without fire must retreat, adapt biologically, or avoid the harshest zones. A species with fire can negotiate. It can create a small artificial climate inside a larger hostile one. This does not mean fire alone explains human expansion into Ice Age worlds. Clothing, shelters, cooperative hunting, storage, tools, and deep environmental knowledge all matter. Later humans and Neanderthals become highly skilled at surviving cold environments through combinations of hideworking, site selection, seasonal planning, and social cooperation. But fire is the centre around which many of these skills become more powerful. Hides can be dried, meat can be roasted, fat can be rendered. Spears can be repaired, bodies can recover after exposure. A shelter with fire is not just a roof, it is a machine for resisting climate. Neanderthals, who inhabit much of Ice Age Europe and Western Asia for hundreds of thousands of years, show this clearly. They are not the brutish caricatures once imagined, but capable humans with tools, hunting knowledge, care for injured individuals, and repeated use of fire. Their world is one of cold pulses and ecological complexity, mammoth steppe, forest refugees, rocky shelters, reindeer, horses, bison, and predators that are not decorative background but real competitors. At many Neanderthal sites, hearths appear as practical centres of life. The evidence varies from place to place, and scholars still debate how consistently Neanderthals could make fire under all conditions, but their use of flame is beyond serious doubt. There is a revealing mystery here. Some researchers have suggested that Neanderthals may have relied heavily on preserving fire rather than always producing it easily, especially during colder or wetter periods when tinder was scarce. Others argue they had reliable fire-making techniques. The archaeological evidence remains incomplete because the tools used for ignition can be hard to identify. Minerals like manganese dioxide may have helped lower the ignition temperature of wood, and certain stone tools may preserve traces of striking. But interpretation is difficult. The debate matters because it reminds us that even advanced Ice Age humans may have experienced fire as a resource that demanded careful management, not as a casual convenience. For Homo sapiens moving out of Africa and across Eurasia, fire also becomes part of the expansion toolkit. Modern humans enter deserts, coasts, forests, mountains, and cold northern latitudes with increasing flexibility. They bring not only flame, but an expanding web of symbolic life, tailored tools, long-distance exchange, ornaments, pigments, and eventually complex shelters. Fire threads through all of it. It warms caves where paintings may later appear, it hardens points and heats pigments. It cooks shellfish on coasts and marrow-rich bones inland. It allows camps to remain active after dark in places where winter nights stretch long. One lesser-known detail from Ice Age archaeology is how carefully hearths can be placed within living spaces. In some Upper Paleolithic sites, fires are not scattered randomly. They sit in relation to sleeping areas, work zones, dumping areas, walls and entrances. Smoke movement, heat distribution, and social organisation all leave faint spatial signatures. This does not mean every camp was tidy or planned like a house, but it shows that fire had become architectural. Even before permanent buildings, people were arranging life around heat, light, and airflow. Fire also changes the meaning of migration across exposed land bridges and newly opened territories. During glacial periods, sea levels fall as water becomes locked in ice, revealing routes that do not exist today. Landscapes such as Beringia, between Siberia and Alaska, are not simple bridges but vast inhabited worlds of steppe, wetland, river, and cold-adapted animals. Any humans moving through such regions must solve problems of fuel, shelter, food, and extreme seasonality. Fire is essential. But fuel may not always mean abundant trees. Dung, bone, driftwood, shrubs, peat, and stored plant material can all matter in different environments. The hearth becomes adaptable, because fuel knowledge becomes adaptable. In some Ice Age settings, people may even burn bone when wood is scarce. Bone does not burn like dry branches, and it often requires fat-rich conditions or a hot existing fire. But archaeological evidence from some cold regions suggests that bone fuel could supplement wood. This small detail reveals a remarkable level of practical understanding. A mammoth, reindeer, or horse is not only meat, hide, sinew, marrow, and tool material. In the right conditions, parts of it can become heat. Survival depends on seeing every material as a set of possible transformations. Fire also makes new food safer and more valuable during hard seasons. Frozen meat can be thawed, tough roots can be softened, bones can be heated to extract grease, shellfish can be opened more easily, starches can become more digestible. In a world where seasonal failure can be fatal, cooking expands the usable menu. It allows humans to live not just by finding ideal foods, but by making imperfect foods better. Still, the Ice Age fire story is not one of effortless conquest. People freeze, fires fail, smoke fills shelters, fuel runs out, storms erase tracks and bury camps. Glaciers grind away entire landscapes that might once have held human traces. What survives in the record suggests resilience, but the record is written by survivors and preserved accidents. Countless hearths are gone forever, along with the groups who gathered around them. Yet the pattern is unmistakable. As humans and their close relatives move through colder and more unstable worlds, fire becomes the portable centre of habitability. It lets a species carry a fragment of warmth into places where warmth is rare. It allows the human body, born of warmer evolutionary roots, to persist beneath colder skies. It turns caves, tents, windbreaks, and snow-edged shelters into livable spaces. It does not defeat the Ice Age. It creates moments of resistance inside it. In the darkness of a glacial evening, the difference between the world outside and the world beside the hearth is absolute. Outside, wind moves over frozen ground, and animals lower their heads against the cold. Inside the glow, hands work hide. Children sleep close to bodies, meat warms on stone, smoke finds its way toward an opening, and embers wait beneath ash for morning. The ice may rule the continent, but within the small circle of flame, human life keeps its own weather. Once humans understand fire well enough to carry it, feed it, and trust it, the flame begins to move beyond the hearth. It no longer changes only the meal, the shelter, the night, or the body. It starts changing the land itself. A burned patch near camp may begin as accident, waste disposal, pest control, or convenience. But over generations, humans learn that fire does not simply destroy vegetation. It rearranges it. It opens paths through brush. It drives animals. It encourages fresh shoots. It clears old growth. It creates edges where one kind of habitat meets another, and edges are often where life gathers most densely. The earliest deliberate landscape burning is difficult to prove, because wildfires also shape ecosystems naturally. Lightning can burn grasslands without human help. Dry seasons can turn entire regions into fuel. Charcoal in ancient sediments may reveal fire, but not always who caused it. Scholars still debate when humans began using fire systematically to manage landscapes, rather than merely responding to natural burns. Yet by the time modern humans and some earlier human groups are well established across varied environments, the possibility becomes increasingly important. Fire is not only a camp technology, it becomes an ecological instrument. In grasslands and savannas, burning can produce immediate advantages. Tall dry grass hides predators and makes movement difficult. A controlled burn clears visibility. It flushes small animals. It may drive larger game toward hunters waiting along escape routes, though such coordination requires skill and carries risk. After rain, burned ground often greens quickly, attracting grazers. The group that understands this cycle can influence where animals feed and where future hunting may be easier. This is not farming in the later sense, but it is a step toward managing abundance rather than simply finding it. Forest edges tell a similar story. Dense woodland can be rich, but it can also be hard to travel through, especially when tangled understory blocks movement. Fire can open corridors, maintain clearings, and encourage plants useful for food, fibre, or attracting animals. Some fire-adapted ecosystems respond to burning with renewal. Certain seeds germinate better after heat or smoke. Some plants resprout quickly from roots after their above-ground growth is burned. Early people would not need modern botanical language to notice these patterns. They only need memory after burning. This place gives. After clearing, animals come. After smoke, insects lessen. After ash, certain shoots return. A lesser-known detail is that human burning can create what ecologists sometimes call mosaic landscapes. Instead of one continuous forest or grassland, repeated small fires produce patches of different ages, fresh green growth, older brush, open ground, scattered trees, and denser refuge. Such variety can increase the availability of different resources within walking distance. It can also reduce the risk of massive uncontrolled fires by breaking up fuel. Though this depends on climate and technique, No single explanation fully accounts for how ancient burning changed every region, because fire behaves differently in wet forests, dry savannas, peatlands, coastal scrub, and cold steppe. But the general principle is powerful humans begin to make landscapes more legible and useful by burning parts of them. The consequences may reach far back in places like Australia, where human arrival and environmental change remain subjects of major debate. By roughly tens of thousands of years ago, people are present on the continent, and Australia's fire regimes, vegetation patterns, and animal communities become part of a complex story involving climate shifts, human burning, and the extinction of large animals. Some popular accounts blame human fire almost entirely for transforming the continent, while others emphasise climate stress or hunting. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate the balance of causes. What can be said carefully is that human fire use becomes one force among several capable of reshaping ecosystems on a continental scale. This is where the fire revolution becomes morally complicated. The same practice that can sustain life can erase it. Burning can renew grass, but it can also destroy nests, kill slow-moving animals, and favour some species over others. It can maintain open landscapes, but reduce forest. It can support human mobility, but alter the futures of plants and animals that never consented to the new regime. Ancient people are not modern industrial destroyers, and their burning often works within ecological rhythms rather than against them. Still, once humans use fire deliberately, they become a geological kind of presence. Their decisions begin to leave signatures in pollen, charcoal, soils, and species distributions. Fire-assisted hunting adds another layer. Ethnographic examples from recent societies show that fire can be used to drive game, expose burrows, concentrate animals, or improve future grazing. These examples cannot simply be copied into deep prehistory, but they show what is possible when humans understand wind, fuel, animal behaviour, and terrain. A fire set in the wrong conditions can kill the hunters as easily as the prey. A fire set with knowledge can turn a landscape into a temporary trap. That kind of burning requires not only courage, but restraint. Fire must be started where it will move, and also where it will stop. Over time, repeated burning may teach humans one of civilization's deepest lessons. The environment is not fixed. It can be nudged, damaged, repaired, encouraged, and transformed. Before fields, before irrigation canals, before city walls, fire shows that the land responds to human action. Burn here, and next season differs. Clear there, and animals pass another way. Keep brush low, and camp becomes safer. Let fuel build too long, and the next blaze becomes uncontrollable. This is practical ecology learned without textbooks, stored in memory, ritual, caution, and habit. The hearth had already gathered people into a circle. Landscape fire expands that circle outward. The camp is no longer the only controlled zone. The surrounding hills, groves, grass patches, and hunting grounds become part of a managed world, though managed unevenly and often imperfectly. This does not mean ancient people imagine themselves as rulers of nature in the modern sense. Many likely understand fire as a dangerous power that must be used within limits, but the effect is real. Humans begin to shape where certain plants grow, where animals graze, how easily people move, and how often destructive fuel accumulates. The strange legacy is that some landscapes later considered wild may actually be partly historical artifacts of long human burning. Open woodlands, grassy clearings, berry patches, and hunting grounds can carry the ghost of generations of fire use. Remove human burning, and some of these places change dramatically, becoming denser, less diverse, or more vulnerable to severe wildfire. The line between natural and cultural landscape begins to blur much earlier than many modern people assume. What looks untouched may have been touched lightly for thousands of years. And yet, in deep time, the traces are subtle, a thin charcoal layer in a lake core, a shift in pollen from forest trees to grasses, a sudden increase in fire frequency, a disappearance difficult to assign to climate, hunting, or burning alone. Archaeologists, paleoecologists, and climate scientists work through these clues with caution, because the ancient Earth rarely gives a simple confession. But the outline is clear enough: fire lets humans act at a scale larger than the body. The arm that once fed sticks into a hearth now reaches across valleys. In the old night, fire carved out a small human centre. In the Ice Age cold, it carried warmth into hostile places. Across landscapes, it begins to write human intention into the growth of plants and the movement of animals. The flame is no longer only kept alive, it is released, watched, guided, and remembered. A blackened hillside may look like an ending, but to those who know its rhythm, it is also a beginning ash settling into soil, green shoots waiting under the surface. Hoofprints returning after rain, and humans learning that destruction, handled carefully, can become a tool of renewal. Once fire becomes a way to change landscapes, it also becomes a way to change materials. The same heat that opens grassland and softens food begins to reveal a deeper truth about the world. Many things are not fixed in the form in which they are found. Stone can be altered, wood can be strengthened, resin can be melted, pigment can shift colour, bone and antler can be worked differently after heating. Clay, when the time comes, can become something almost stone-like. Fire teaches that matter has hidden states, and that heat is the doorway between them. This discovery does not arrive as a single invention. It grows from ordinary camp life. A wooden point left near flame becomes harder at its tip. A stone placed too close to heat cracks with a sharp report. A lump of resin softens and turns sticky. A bone dropped into embers changes colour and texture. A patch of earth under repeated fires reddens and hardens. Most of these first lessons may have been accidents, and some accidents would have been useless or dangerous. But human attention is patient when survival is involved. Over generations, accidents become patterns, and patterns become techniques. One of the simplest transformations is fire-hardened wood. Wooden tools rarely survive from deep prehistory, which means their importance is often underestimated. Stone endures, so stone dominates museum cases, but ancient humans likely lived in a world of wood-digging sticks, spears, handles, wedges, containers, frames, levers, and shelters. Fire can help shape wood by charring a surface, scraping away softened parts and hardening a point. The technique is not magical. Burned wood can become brittle if overdone, but controlled heating gives hands another way to work a material that stone alone cannot fully master. Stone itself also changes under heat. Some rocks become easier to flake after careful thermal treatment. Later prehistoric toolmakers in several regions deliberately heated stone such as silkrete, chert, or other knappable materials to improve fracture quality. This requires impressive control, because too much heat shatters the stone and ruins it. The evidence remains incomplete for the earlier stages, and scholars still debate when deliberate heat treatment becomes widespread. But by later Stone Age contexts, the skill is unmistakable. A toolmaker who heat treats stone is no longer merely striking nature into shape. They are preparing nature to be shaped. Adhesives reveal an even more subtle fire technology. To attach a stone point to a wooden shaft, humans need binding systems sinew, fibre, resin, gum, bitumen, or mixtures including ochre and plant materials. Some of these adhesives must be heated carefully. Too cool, and they remain stiff or useless. Too hot, and they burn, bubble, or lose strength. Compound adhesives appear in Middle Stone Age contexts and later, showing that humans could combine ingredients and use heat with precision. This is chemistry before chemistry has a name. It is also planning, because the ingredients may come from different places and require preparation before the final tool exists. A lesser-known example comes from birch tar, used by Neanderthals and later humans as an adhesive. Producing birch tar can require heating bark under low oxygen conditions, a surprisingly sophisticated process depending on the method used. Researchers still debate how complex the earliest production techniques were, and some experimental work shows simpler methods may be possible than once assumed. Even so, the result is remarkable. A sticky black substance made from bark becomes a means to join stone and wood into a more effective tool. Fire is not only shaping materials directly, it is helping create composites, objects made powerful because different materials are united. Pigments also enter the fire story. Ochre, manganese, charcoal, and other mineral or organic materials become part of human symbolic and practical life. Heating can alter colour, turning yellows redder or changing texture. Pigments may be used on bodies, hides, tools, cave surfaces, or in mixtures with adhesives. Not every pigment use is symbolic, and not every red stain is ritual. Ochre can help preserve hides, act as an abrasive, or improve glue. Yet once humans begin deliberately selecting, grinding, heating, and applying colour, fire's influence reaches into the visual imagination. The world can be marked. Bone, antler, and shell also respond to heat, sometimes usefully, sometimes destructively. Heat can make materials easier to crack, clean, or process, but it can also weaken them. The point is not that every ancient craft depends on fire, but that fire expands the range of possible craft decisions. It adds a new variable. A toolmaker can now ask, through experience rather than words, whether this material should be warmed, charred, dried, smoked, softened, hardened, or kept away from heat entirely. This is one of the quiet foundations of technology-controlled transformation. The hearth becomes a laboratory, though not in the modern sense of glass vessels and written measurements. It is a place where repeated observation accumulates. People learn which stones explode if heated wet. They learn which woods bend with warmth and which split. They learn which resins smoke, which flow, which hold. They learn that ash, fat, blood, plant fibre, hide, and mineral powder behave differently near flame. What survives in the record suggests only fragments of this knowledge, because many of the materials vanish, but the vanished materials may have carried much of the intelligence. Fire also changes time and toolmaking. Some objects can no longer be made in one immediate sequence. They require preparation, drying, heating, cooling, mixing, hafting, and curing. This creates delayed reward. The maker must hold a plan through stages. A spear with a stone point and adhesive binding is not simply picked up from the ground. It's assembled from landscape memory of the tree that gives the shaft, the stone source, the resin, the fibre, the fire, the skill of joining. No single explanation fully accounts for the rise of complex technology, but fire provides one of its central lessons: the best tool may come from a process, not a single act. Eventually, this lesson will lead far beyond the Stone Age. Clay hardened in fire becomes pottery, certain stones heated intensely reveal metals, ores become copper, bronze, iron, sand becomes glass, kilns, furnaces, smelters, forges, and ovens all descend from the ancient insight that heat can unlock hidden properties in matter. But those later revolutions are still far away. In the deep past, the first material transformations are humbler, closer to the hand, and perhaps more astonishing because they are discovered without any inherited map. The mystery is how much of this early knowledge is lost to us because it was made of perishable things. A Stone Age campsite might have held baskets, cords, wooden tools, hide containers, resin glues, feather ornaments, bark carriers, digging sticks, and hafted weapons, while leaving behind mostly stones and bones. Fire may have touched all of these vanished objects. It may have dried them, shaped them, preserved them briefly, or destroyed them completely. Archaeology gives us the durable skeleton of ancient technology, but the living body was richer. By altering materials, fire alters imagination. It teaches that the world is not only found, hunted, gathered, and endured. It can be processed. It can be coaxed into new forms. A branch can become a spear. A stone can become sharper after heat. Bark can become glue. Earth can harden. Colour can be made stronger. This is not yet industry, but it is the mental seed of industry, the belief, learned through practice. The hidden possibilities wait inside matter. At the edge of a prehistoric fire, someone turns a wooden shaft slowly in the heat, careful not to let it burn too deeply. Nearby, a stone lies warming under ash. Resin softens on a fragment of bark. Smoke rises, carrying the familiar sting of shelter and survival. Nothing here looks like a factory, and yet the principle that will one day build furnaces and cities is already present. Fire has become a teacher of transformation, and human hands are learning to ask what else the world can become. Beside the embers, fire becomes more than heat, food, protection, and craft. It becomes presence. This is the most difficult part of the ancient fire revolution to approach, because the evidence thins almost to silence. A burned bone can be measured, a hearth stain can be mapped, a heat-treated stone can be tested, but meaning does not fossilize easily. Fear, gratitude, memory, grief, and belonging leave only indirect traces, and the deeper we travel into prehistory, the more careful we must be. Still, it would be strange to imagine that a force as bright, dangerous, useful, and unpredictable as fire remained only practical in the human mind. Later societies surround fire with meaning almost everywhere. Hearths become centres of households. Sacred flames mark temples, altars, ancestors, gods, vows, cremations, festivals, purification, kingship, hospitality, and danger. These later traditions cannot simply be pushed backward into the Stone Age, as if all humans thought the same way across time. Scholars still debate when symbolic behaviour becomes rich, regular, and unmistakable. Yet the wide human tendency to treat fire as more than a tool may preserve a very old intuition. Flame behaves like no other companion in human life. It is made of movement. It eats dead wood and gives warmth. It destroys bodies and makes food safe. It rises toward the sky and leaves ash behind. It must be protected, but it can also protect. For a mind already alert to patterns and agency in the world, fire almost invites significance. The hearth itself may have encouraged this. A fire gathers people into a circle, and circles create attention. The centre glows while faces appear around it. Shadows move on stone or skin. Sparks rise and vanish. The same place where meat cooks may also be where wounds are examined. Children are quieted, tools are repaired, and the dead are remembered. No single explanation fully accounts for how ritual begins. But repeated gathering around a powerful centre is one of the conditions from which ritual can grow. A practical habit, repeated with care, can become charged with meaning over generations. Death may have deepened that charge. Fire's relationship with the body is both intimate and terrifying. It warms living flesh, cooks animal flesh, and can consume the dead. Evidence for deliberate cremation appears much later than the earliest fire use, and it must not be assumed for every ancient group. Burial practices are themselves complex and debated, especially when looking at Neanderthals and early Homo sapiens. But even without formal cremation, ancient humans would have seen burned bodies of animals after wildfires, bones cracking in hearths, fat feeding flame, and ash covering remains. Fire reveals that bodies can transform dramatically. It turns what was solid into smoke, smell, fragments, and powder. Such transformation is difficult to imagine as emotionally neutral. Pigments and fire may meet at the edge of symbolic life. Red ochre, charcoal black, white ash, and heated mineral colours give humans ways to mark surfaces and bodies. Some uses are practical, others symbolic, and often the two may overlap. A red-stained object might be decoration, medicine, hide treatment, adhesive ingredient, or something else entirely. The evidence remains incomplete, and archaeologists rightly resist turning every pigment into proof of ritual. Yet when humans gather colour, alter it, and apply it deliberately, they are making choices that reach beyond immediate calories. Fire's ability to create charcoal and transform mineral colour places it quietly inside the early history of art and marking. Caves intensify the mystery. In later prehistoric Europe and elsewhere, humans carry lamps or torches deep underground, into spaces where natural light cannot reach. They paint animals, signs, hand stencils, and forms whose meanings remain debated. These painted caves are much younger than the first fire use, but they show how flame can open a second world beneath the visible one. Without portable light, the deep cave is inaccessible to sustained human attention. With fire, walls flicker. Painted animals seem to move, and darkness becomes a chamber for memory or ceremony. It is tempting to connect this directly to the first hearths, but caution is needed. The time gap is vast. Still, the principle is ancient fire lets humans enter darkness and make it meaningful. There is also the ordinary ceremony of tending. A fire must be fed in the right way. Too much fuel smothers or flares, too little lets it die. Wet fuel smokes, dry fuel races. Ash protects embers, coals can be shared. These actions may begin as technique, but technique repeated daily can become custom. Who tends the fire? Who starts it? Who carries embers when the group moves? Who is blamed if it dies? Who teaches the young to approach it? We do not know the answers for deep prehistory, but the questions themselves show how fire can become embedded in social order. A hearth is not only a heat source, it is a responsibility with witnesses. A lesser-known possibility is that fire helped shape early music and rhythm. This cannot be proved for the earliest periods, but firelit gatherings create conditions for repeated sound clapping, tapping, movement, breath, vocal patterning. Later humans often combined fire, night, dance, and communal performance. The connection may arise because fire makes night gatherings safer and more visually intense. Shadows amplify movement, rhythms synchronize bodies, in a world without writing. Such shared experiences can carry memory and identity. Again, the evidence is indirect, but fire creates the stage on which these human capacities can gather. The danger is romanticizing the past too much. Not every hearth is sacred. Many fires are simply for cooking, warmth, and survival. Ancient people were practical because impractical people often did not survive. A fire could be smoky, annoying, labour-intensive, and dangerous. It could burn children, ruin tools, or attract unwanted attention. Any deeper meaning attached to it would have grown alongside these frustrations, not instead of them. Fire's power lies partly in that mixture. It is never only holy, never only useful, never only dangerous, never only comforting. It is all of these at once. What survives in the record suggests that human symbolic life becomes clearer over time. Pigments, ornaments, burials, cave art, figurines, special deposits, and repeated practices that seem to carry meaning beyond immediate utility. Fire appears in and around many of these contexts, but it does not explain them alone. Human imagination has many roots: social life, death awareness, landscape, animals, dreams, memory, and the body itself. Fire is one root among them, glowing where practical survival touches wonder. Beside a deep prehistoric hearth, someone watches embers collapse inward. The day's work is done, but sleep has not yet taken the group. The flame moves without walking, it speaks without words. It makes the same wood become light, heat, smoke, and ash. A child watches, learning both caution and fascination. An elder shifts a coal with a stick, sparks rise and vanish into blackness. No myth survives from that moment, no prayer, no name, no story can be recovered. But the scene contains the raw materials from which meaning grows danger held close, transformation made visible, and a community gathered around a centre that seems almost alive. Long before fields become permanent and villages harden into settlements, fire is already teaching humans how to edit the land. It clears, renews, concentrates, and prepares. Foragers who burn grass to attract game or open pathways are not yet farming, but they are learning one of farming's deepest assumptions: the future can be shaped before it arrives. A patch burned today may feed animals tomorrow. A clearing made this season may yield useful plants next season. Ash left behind may change the soil. The flame becomes a way of making promises to a landscape, though the landscape does not always keep them. The agricultural revolution does not begin with fire alone. It depends on climate stability after the last ice age, on plant and animal species suitable for domestication, on population pressures in some regions, on storage, tools, water, social memory, and countless local experiments. Scholars still debate why farming appears independently in several parts of the world, and why some groups adopt it while others avoid it for millennia. But when cultivation begins, fire is already waiting as an ancient partner. Land must be opened, brush must be cleared, old vegetation must be removed, pests must be reduced, nutrients locked in plants can be returned quickly as ash. In many early farming systems, burning is not a side detail, it is the threshold act. Slash and burn agriculture, more carefully called swidden in many contexts, shows this principle clearly. Trees or brush are cut, dried, burned, and planted into the ash-rich ground. For a time, the soil may produce well, then fertility declines, weeds increase, and the plot is left to recover while people move to another. This system can be sustainable at low population densities with long fallow periods, but destructive when pushed too hard or compressed by land pressure. Its ancient roots are difficult to trace everywhere, yet the logic likely appears early wherever cultivation meets forest or dense vegetation. Fire lets people turn a living plant community into a temporary field. This is a profound change in human time. A hunter following animals responds to movement already underway. A gatherer harvesting seasonal plants works with cycles that return on their own. A farmer burns, plants, waits, protects, and expects. Fire helps create that waiting. It marks a place for future attention. The blackened field is a calendar written in ash. Seeds go in because people believe the ground has been prepared. Civilization, in its later monumental forms, begins partly from this confidence that land can be made to answer. The first settled communities are not all farming communities, and not all farmers live in permanent villages immediately. The transition is uneven. In places such as the Fertile Crescent, parts of China, Mesoamerica, the Andes, New Guinea, and Africa, domestication follows different plants, animals, climates, and social paths. Yet fire appears again and again near the foundations. It clears land for cereals, helps manage grazing, cooks grains into digestible meals, parches seeds, dries harvest, protects stores from damp, and eventually transforms clay into pottery, which changes storage and cooking in ways as important as the field itself. Pottery is one of fire's great agricultural companions. Clay is ordinary until heat changes it. Once fired, a vessel can hold grain, water, stew, oil, beer, seed, or memory in the form of decoration. Pottery does not appear everywhere at the same time, and in some regions it predates farming while in others it spreads with settled life. The evidence remains incomplete and regionally varied, but the principle is consistent. Fire turns soft earth into durable container. A society that can store food more reliably can remain in one place longer, feed more people, survive seasonal gaps, and accumulate surplus. Surplus is not civilization by itself, but it is one of civilization's dangerous ingredients. With surplus come new pressures. Stored grain attracts rodents, insects, thieves, and authorities. It can support feasts, trade, specialists, and leaders. It can also support inequality. Fire-baked storage jars, hearths, ovens, and kilns become part of the infrastructure of settled life. The ancient hearth expands into the village oven, the communal cooking space, the pottery kiln, the lime-burning pit, the brick clamp. Heat is no longer only domestic, it becomes architectural and economic. Mud brick offers a quiet but immense example. Sun-dried bricks can build walls, but fired bricks resist water and time more effectively. In many early civilizations, the control of heat helps turn clay-rich landscapes into durable structures. The same logic later produces roof tiles, pipes, tablets, and sealed administrative objects. Writing itself, in Mesopotamia, survives in part because clay tablets are hardened, sometimes accidentally by fire when buildings burn. There is a strange irony here: destruction preserves memory. Fires that consume palaces and archives can bake records into survival, leaving later archaeologists the accounts, lists, laws, and letters of worlds otherwise lost. Metallurgy pushes the threshold further. At first, humans use native metals such as copper or gold, which can be hammered without smelting, but extracting metal from ore requires far more controlled heat. Furnaces, charcoal, airflow, crucibles, and repeated experimentation are necessary before stone gives up metal hidden within it. Copper smelting, bronze alloying, and later ironworking do not arise everywhere at once, and their spread is uneven. Scholars still debate many local sequences and independent inventions, but all metallurgy descends from the fire lesson learned long before heat can reveal a new material inside an old one. Charcoal becomes especially important because it burns hotter and cleaner than ordinary wood. Making charcoal requires heating wood in low oxygen, so it transforms without simply turning to ash. This is another controlled destruction, another carefully managed absence of air. With charcoal, furnaces reach temperatures that ordinary campfires cannot sustain. The line from ember keeping to metallurgy is long, but it is continuous in principle. Each step asks humans to manage fuel, air, containment. Timing and transformation. The consequences reshape societies. Metal tools clear forests faster, metal weapons alter warfare, metal ornaments mark status, ploughs, axes, knives, chisels, and later iron tools expand agriculture and construction. Fire-fed technologies begin to accelerate one another. More fields require more clearing provides fuel but also reduces forests. More kilns make more containers, bricks, and trade goods. More surplus supports more specialists develop better furnaces. The small ancient hearth has become a network of heat engines distributed across settlements and states. No single explanation fully accounts for the rise of civilization. Rivers, crops, animals, trade routes, climate, social organization, religion, conflict, and geography all matter. But without fire, the chain breaks repeatedly. No cooked grain porridge in village pots, no fired storage jars, no bricks hardened by heat, no copper smelting, no bronze tools, no iron ploughs, no lime plaster, no glass, no large-scale baking, brewing, or forging. Civilization is not made of fire alone. But fire runs through its skeleton. And yet the old ambivalence remains. The field burned for planting can become erosion. The forest cut for charcoal can vanish. The kiln that makes pottery demands fuel. The furnace that makes metal consumes trees. The city that shines with lamps requires oil, wood, labour, and extraction. Fire gives settled life permanence, but it also teaches settled societies how to consume their surroundings faster than they return. By the time villages become towns and towns become cities, flame has changed scale so dramatically that its ancient intimacy can be forgotten. It is still in the cooking hearth, but also in workshops, walls, temples, cremation grounds, bakeries, breweries, metal shops, and battlefields. The fire once protected beneath ash now roars in furnaces and city ovens. It no longer merely helps humans survive a landscape. It helps build new landscapes of mud brick, field, road, wall, and smoke. The agricultural threshold is therefore not a break from the ancient fire revolution. It is the moment when that revolution begins to settle down, multiply, and harden into institutions. The ember that once widened the night now widens production. The flame that once softened roots now feeds granaries. The heat that once changed stone and wood now changes clay, or architecture and power. Civilization rises not out of fire alone, but through 1,000 controlled burnings. Each one small enough to seem ordinary, together large enough to transform the human future. Every revolution leaves a shadow, and fire's shadow is older than civilization itself. From the beginning, the flame that protects also threatens. It warms the sleeping child and burns the careless hand. It cooks the meal and destroys the shelter. It opens land for new growth and empties nests, burrows, groves, and forests. It gives humans power over darkness, cold, food, and matter, but it never gives that power without cost. The ancient fire revolution is not a simple victory over nature. It is the beginning of a bargain so successful that humanity spends the rest of history trying to pay for it. At the scale of a small group, the costs are immediate. Smoke fills lungs, sparks ruin bedding. A fire set too close to dry grass turns a camp into panic. Stored fuel attracts insects or snakes. Children must be kept away from embers. Someone must gather wood when tired, hungry, injured, or cold. A hearth can fail in rain, but it can also become too large in wind. The evidence remains incomplete for the earliest accidents, because disaster rarely preserves itself neatly. But no one who lived with open flame could have mistaken it for a harmless servant. Fire is useful precisely because it is dangerous energy brought near the body. At the scale of landscapes, the consequences grow wider. Repeated burning can maintain grasslands, clear paths, and increase certain foods, but it can also simplify habitats, reduce old forests, and favour species adapted to disturbance. Some animals benefit from burned mosaics, others vanish from them. Some plants return quickly, others do not. In the deep past, human burning works alongside climate shifts, natural fire, hunting, and changing animal populations, making cause and effect difficult to separate. Scholars still debate the role of human fire in extinctions and ecological transformations in places such as Australia, the Americas, and in many island worlds. No single explanation fully accounts for these changes, but fire is often one of the forces standing near the scene. Islands show the danger with particular clarity. Many island ecosystems evolve without frequent fire, large predators, or human disturbance. When people arrive carrying flame, agriculture, animals, and new hunting pressures, the balance can shift quickly. Forests are cleared, ground nesting birds lose shelter, soils erode. Species with no fear of humans become easy prey. Not every island story is the same, and climate or volcanic events can also play roles. But the pattern repeats often enough to feel ominous. Fire lets humans bring a mainland technology into fragile worlds that have never learned to resist it. In settled societies, fire's cost becomes social as well as ecological. Whoever controls fuel, kilns, furnaces, ovens, and metal production controls more than warmth. They control tools, weapons, storage, construction, and sometimes ritual authority. A communal hearth can bind people together, but a furnace can serve kings, armies, and elites. Metal tools improve farming. Metal weapons improve killing. Fired bricks build houses. They also build walls, prisons, and fortresses. Fire does not create inequality by itself, but it gives inequality harder materials to work with. Warfare intensifies fire's darker role. Villages burn, granaries burn, siege engines hurl flame, ships catch fire at sea. Cities that took generations to build can be reduced to charcoal in a night. In archaeology, destruction layers often become strangely informative because burned buildings preserve collapsed roofs, carbonized grain, baked tablets, and sealed rooms. The record of fire is therefore double-edged. Even for historians, catastrophe becomes evidence. Human suffering becomes a layer that can be excavated. What survives in the record suggests not only technological power, but repeated human willingness to turn that power against other humans. There is also the slow hunger of fuel. Early fires need wood, brush, dung, bone, or peat. Villages need more. Kilns, lime burners, metal furnaces, bakeries, and cities need still more. Forests retreat around growing settlements. Charcoal makers cut hillsides. Shipbuilders, smelters, potters, and households compete for trees. In some ancient regions, deforestation contributes to erosion, declining soil fertility, and local environmental stress. Though the exact weight of fire-driven fuel demand varies greatly from place to place, the evidence remains regionally complex, but the broader lesson is clear. Once fire becomes infrastructure, it requires supply chains. That phrase sounds modern, but the reality is ancient. A bronze tool is not just metal, it is ore, fuel, labour, transport, furnace design, specialist skill, and social organisation. An iron blade contains forest turned into charcoal. A fired brick contains clay dug from earth and heat taken from wood. A loaf of bread contains not only grain, but oven fuel. Behind every fire-made object stands an appetite. The flame consumes matter to produce order. And societies learn to hide that consumption behind the finished thing. The health costs continue inside homes. For much of human history, indoor smoke is a constant companion. Hearths without chimneys fill rooms with particulates. Eyes water, lungs scar. Infants breathe smoke from the beginning of life. The warmth that prevents freezing also carries chronic harm. This is one of fire's oldest ironies. The technology that helps humans survive may also shorten lives in ways too gradual to appear as dramatic catastrophe, even today. Household air pollution from solid fuels remains a serious problem in parts of the world, a modern echo of an ancient bargain. Fire also changes human psychology. It teaches control, but it can encourage overconfidence. A burned clearing grows back, so perhaps another can be burned. A forest edge opens, so perhaps the whole valley can be opened. A kiln succeeds, so a larger kiln is built. A furnace melts ore, so hotter furnaces are demanded. The success of fire technologies invites escalation. Each generation inherits the benefits as normal, and the costs as background. The ancient ember becomes the furnace. The furnace becomes the engine, and the engine becomes a planetary force before anyone fully understands the chain. Still, it would be too simple to condemn fire. Without it, there is no long human night of stories, no cooked food that helps support expanding bodies and minds, no cold weather migrations, no pottery, no metallurgy, no cities in the form we know them. The price of the flame is not proof that fire was a mistake. It is proof that every transformative power carries consequences beyond its first use. The same is true of language, agriculture, writing, industry, and perhaps intelligence itself. Power extends possibility, and possibility includes harm. The ancient people tending their hearths do not see this whole future. They see the immediate world, the child warmed, the meat cooked, the predator kept back, the rain survived. Their decisions are rational, intimate, and necessary. They cannot be blamed for coal smoke over industrial cities or carbon rising in the atmosphere hundreds of thousands of years later. Yet the connection is real. Once humans learn to depend on combustion, history begins following a path where more heat, more fuel, and more transformation often appear as solutions. So the fire revolution carries a hidden contradiction. It helps humans escape some natural limits by creating artificial environments. But those artificial environments generate new limits of their own. Fuel must be found, smoke must be endured, forests must recover, fields must not erode, furnaces must be fed, cities must not burn, atmospheres must absorb what combustion releases until they cannot absorb it quietly anymore. In the end, fire's price is not paid once, it is paid repeatedly, in small daily costs and great historical shocks. A cough in a smoky shelter, a hillside stripped for charcoal, a species gone from a burned island, a city turned to ash, a climate nudged by accumulated flames. The ancient hearth gives humanity a centre, but it also gives humanity a pattern to solve a problem by burning part of the world and hoping the rest can bear it. The fire still inside human civilization is no longer always visible as flame. It hides in wires, engines, turbines, factories, satellites, data centres, and cities lit so brightly at night that they glow from orbit. A person turning on a light does not see the ancient hearth. A train moving through darkness does not resemble a burning branch carried across a plain. A phone charging beside a bed seems far removed from embers banked under ash. Yet much of the modern world still runs on the same old principle. Stored energy is released through controlled transformation, and heat becomes power, motion, light, and order. For most of history, the chain remains recognizable. Wood burns in hearths, charcoal feeds furnaces, oil lamps push back darkness, coal heats homes, steam engines turn fire into mechanical force. Then the scale changes. The Industrial Revolution is, in one sense, an enormous expansion of the fire revolution. Coal is ancient sunlight stored in buried forests. Oil and gas are deep time remains of life transformed underground. When humans learn to burn these fuels at vast scale, they are no longer only clearing fields or firing pots. They are unlocking geological time and spending it in centuries. The evidence is not mysterious here, though its consequences are still debated in politics and daily life. Modern industry is built on combustion, and combustion changes the atmosphere. This is the long echo of the first ember. Fire once created a warm circle in a cold night. Later it created villages, workshops, ships, weapons, kilns, and cities. Now it creates planetary effects. Carbon released from fossil fuels thickens the greenhouse blanket around Earth. Forest fires intensified by heat, drought, land use, and climate feedbacks burn through landscapes already altered by humans. No single explanation fully accounts for every modern fire disaster because ignition, weather, vegetation, settlement, and policy all interact. But the larger pattern is clear enough: the species that learned to survive by controlling fire now lives in a world where fire, energy, and climate can no longer be separated. And still, fire remains intimate. People gather around campfires not because they need them in the old way, but because something in the glow still organises attention. Candles are lit for grief, celebration, prayer, romance, and memory. Hearths and kitchens remain emotional centres even when heat comes from electricity or gas hidden behind metal. The word home still carries the old warmth of a tended centre. What survives in culture suggests that fire never became merely technical. It remains symbolic because it entered human life before civilization, before writing, perhaps before our species fully became itself. The ancient fire revolution also survives inside the human body. Cooked food is now so normal that raw diets are treated as unusual choices rather than the default condition of life. Human teeth, guts, schedules, cuisines, and social meals all carry the legacy of heat. Breakfast toast, rice steam, roasted coffee, baked bread, boiled soup, grilled fish, and cooked grain are not small cultural decorations. They are daily repetitions of a prehistoric transformation. Every kitchen is a descendant of a hearth, however polished, tiled, or electric it may be. It survives in technology as well, even where open flame disappears. Metallurgy, ceramics, glass, cement, plastics, silicon chips, and spacecraft all depend on controlled heat somewhere in their making. The modern world is full of objects that have passed through fire or its descendants. A city is basically a frozen archive of heat bricks fired, metal smelted, asphalt processed, glass melted, concrete calcined, wires drawn, machines forged. The flame may be hidden upstream in industrial systems, but it remains there, shaping matter before the finished object reaches the hand. Yet the deepest legacy may be cognitive. Fire taught humans that the world could be transformed deliberately. It taught patience, sequence, danger management, and delayed reward. It taught that a process could be tended across time. It taught that destruction and creation are sometimes bound together so tightly that separating them becomes impossible. This lesson runs through agriculture, industry, medicine, engineering, and politics. Humanity repeatedly takes unstable forces and tries to house them inside rules, containers, institutions, and machines. Fire was one of the first teachers of that dangerous art. Scholars still debate the earliest dates, the first makers, the role of Homo erectus, the exact influence of cooking on the brain, and the uneven spread of habitual fire use. The evidence remains incomplete, and probably always will. The first truly controlled flame may have left no trace. The first cooked meal may be archaeologically invisible. The first night story beside a hearth is gone beyond recovery. But uncertainty does not weaken the importance of the transformation. It gives it depth. The fire revolution is not a clean invention pinned to one date. It is a long entanglement between human beings and a force that was never fully tame. That is why the story ends not with mastery, but with relationship. Humans did not conquer fire once and for all. They learned to live with it, depend on it, fear it, hide it, industrialize it, symbolize it, and unleash it. The same glow that once kept predators outside the circle now shines through cities, engines, power grids, and warning signs on a warming planet. Fire made civilization possible, but it also left civilization with one of its oldest questions. How much transformation can the world endure before the gift becomes a debt? The ancient hearth is still burning, though its smoke now rises in forms the first firekeepers could never have imagined. It rises from factories, exhaust pipes, power plants, wildfire fronts, rockets, kitchens, cremation grounds, festival lamps, and candles held in quiet rooms. It rises from memory. It rises from the old bargain. And somewhere beneath all the layers of industry and history, the scene remains simple, a small group gathered against the dark, watching a flame that's dangerous. Beautiful and necessary, not knowing that this flicker will one day reach the whole earth. When the story of fire is followed far enough, it stops being only a story about invention. It becomes a story about dependency and about the strange tenderness humans can feel toward dangerous things. The first hearths are gone, their ashes dissolved into ancient soil, their stones have cracked and scattered, their shelters have collapsed, and the hands that fed them have vanished so completely that even their names were never born. Yet the pattern they began remains close. A flame is still a small sun brought down to human height. It still asks to be fed. It still gives warmth only by consuming something else. Across deep time, fire turns out to be one of humanity's oldest mirrors. In it, people see appetite, creativity, risk, memory, and transformation. They see the power to make a hostile night livable and the power to turn a forest into smoke. They see comfort and warning in the same light. Civilizations rise around that contradiction. They cook, build, forge, clear, write, conquer, mourn, and celebrate with heat at their center. Then, when the fires become too large to see as fires, when they disappear into engines and grids and industrial systems, contradiction remains. The glow has only changed shape. There is humility in remembering that the revolution began without monuments. No empire announced it, no city recorded it, no priest, king, or scholar named it. Somewhere in deep prehistory, a coal survived until morning. A meal softened in ash. A child slept closer to warmth. A predator stayed beyond the light. Such small survivals gathered across generations until they became anatomy, society, technology, myth, agriculture, industry, and crisis. The vast human world is built partly from countless moments that looked, at the time, like simply getting through the night. And perhaps that is the final image worth keeping, not the furnace, not the burning city, not the bright electric planet, but the ember under ash, quiet, nearly hidden, easy to lose, powerful only if tended with care. It is a reminder that civilization is not just made by discovery, but by maintenance, by what people choose to keep alive, by what they protect from wind, by what they feed and what they restrain. The ancient fire is still with us, not only in flame, but in every transformed material, every cooked meal, every lit window, every warning about what uncontrolled heat can do. It flickers at the beginning of the human story, and it still flickers ahead, asking the same question it asked in the dark, whether the hand that reaches toward power can also learn enough patience to tend it.